Here to discuss is Tia Mitchell. She's the Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks so much for joining us. So, both campaigns had just 4 weeks to get their supporters back to the polls again. Was there any shift in strategy from either camp?
Well, I think overall their messaging was pretty consistent, but I will say that Senator Warnock in general really made this runoff. I was there the day after the midterm election when he kicked off his runoff campaign, and he said this campaign is about character and competence. He says those words at virtually every campaign stop he's made over the past few weeks. So he's really focused his message on saying that Herschel Walker is not prepared. He doesn't have the experience or the competency to serve in this role. This has been a big part of Raphael Warnock's closing message. Herschel Walker, on the other hand, has really stuck to his talking points and has really continued to speak to those conservative Republican voters in his base that he wants to turn out in hopes of winning the election.
I know I thought I heard that former President Donald Trump was supposed to be doing like a virtual rally, but it seems like, President Biden and the former President Trump have kind of generally kept their distance. What was the thinking there?
So, yes, President Trump did a virtual rally last night, and President Biden has done things like phone banking, fundraising, radio interviews. But neither one of them have physically campaigned in Georgia. So they have kept some distance from their candidates, worried that their presence could be a distraction and actually help the opposition.
So we're seeing some record early voting numbers. Now, in the past, as you know, Democrats have disproportionately benefited from this. Is that likely to be the case this time around?
Yes, early voting set some single-day records, but there's still a lot of voters who we expect to turn out today because overall early voting was down a little bit. Again, that's part of that condensed runoff calendar that we saw. But the early voting numbers do appear that they did help Raphael Warnock slightly. Democrats tend to support early voting more, engage in early voting more than Republicans these days. So it looks like Raphael Warnock might have a little bit of an edge going into Election Day, but that's something that Herschel Walker hopes to make up the difference with his turnout today.
We keep mentioning, Tia, that there's a possibility of rain and that might dampen, no pun intended, voter turnout today. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, it might if you're waiting for an hour and a half outside to cast your ballot. So I have a question about these incredibly long waits, especially when we've seen record early voting. So a lot of people have already cast their ballots. Right. Is anyone having a conversation about why it's taking so long to cast your ballots? Earlier today, I heard about somebody waiting 3 hours. That seems highly unreasonable. We just had an election. This should be happening faster.
So I'll say I just want to say two things first. Number one, the state's voting system director says that lines are going pretty well so far this morning. And last midterm in the midterms on November, Election Day went pretty smoothly across Georgia for the most part. So they're hoping that things are smooth today and that the lines are not too long. That being said, again, with that shortened runoff window, that's a byproduct. That's something that Democrats said was always going to be a concern when Republicans who control the state changed the runoff window. There were fewer days for early voting, which means some people that may have taken advantage if they had more days and more time to do so, now they have to show up on Election Day, and that could stress those precincts. Again, we aren't necessarily seeing that on a widespread basis now, but it's possible, and that's something that Democrats say is very concerning for them. They consider that, evidence of possibly suppressing the vote.
Tia, really interesting. Tia Mitchell, thank you very much. So be sure to join us this evening for our Red and Blue election special. It's going to kick off at 5 p.m. Eastern. Our team of reporters and correspondents will be on the ground in Georgia, following the latest developments as the votes come in. There will also be a special edition of Red and Blue at 9 p.m. Eastern with the latest vote count from our CBS News election data desk.